I'm Jamie Seeker, and this is What It Takes. Each episode, I sit down with real business owners to talk about their journey, the wins, the challenges, and everything in between. Let's dive in. Welcome, everybody, to What It Takes, the podcast where we uncover the real stories behind business success. We dive deep into challenges, the wins, and the lessons learned by entrepreneurs who've built something meaningful. Today, we have an incredible guest, somebody who has not only mastered the science of sleep, but has also turned it into a thriving business. So, if you know me personally at all, if you listened at all, have any interactions, you know that this is something I'm extremely excited about talking about today. James Leinhardt is the CEO and chief sleep posture expert at Levitex. It's a company revolutionizing how we think about sleep. He's dedicated his career to educating the world about sleep posture and providing science-backed solutions to improve it. From working with elite athletes, NHS staff, and Paralympians to being featured in major media outlets like BBC News, Tech Radar US, and Newsweek. James has proven that sleep isn't just about rest, it's about performance, health, and longevity. So, I was so excited when I got to meet him, and his journey is one of innovation, resilience, and purpose. We'll talk about how he built Levitex, the obstacles he overcame, and the science behind optimizing sleep for better success. So, let's dive in. Hi, James.
How are we doing? That was quite the introduction. Thank you. The pressure is on.
Oh, yes, yes. Well, you're welcome. I am just so excited. We were chatting before we got started here. This is such a really cool thing. And I think it's something that, especially here in America, sleep is something that we just feel is for the weak and, it's pushed off to the side. But you've built a whole business around something most people don't think about, and that's sleep posture. It's something that you obviously kind of identified in my, sleeping, everything that I'm trying to do. You're like, well, you know, we're going to uncover what you need to do today. And I'm like, okay. So what first sparked your passion for this?
I was really lucky because I was approached by two neurophysios about 15 years ago or so, something like that, and they wanted to develop a sleep system to manage the posture of patients that had complex needs, of people with brain injuries or people who'd suffered strokes or had complex needs like people with MS or cerebral palsy, so people who were bedbound and immobile. And the principle was that the patients were so uncomfortable in bed, they weren't sleeping. They also had to be turned every 2 to 4 hours by carers who did a really, largely not a great job of it. There was kind of no real science behind that. Excuse me. So the principle was to develop something for those very specific patient groups. But what happened really quickly in that journey was that I got to see what happens to people when they're really uncomfortable, when they have such awful conditions, and when people with these sorts of conditions are so uncomfortable, very often it presents with loads of tension, high tone, and over time that turns into sort of body shape change and deformity. So I got to see this quite awful world, and what I realized was that the people were being uh, forced into sleeping on mattresses and surfaces that didn't support them properly, that was designed for, they would be designed for pressure relief or something clinical for the benefit, not necessarily of the person's sleep, the primary function of a mattress. And so I developed Levitex. It was a foam formulation that just was based on all the things that the patients weren't getting. What I don't think I realized at the very beginning was that that was relevant to everyone. So that's that first mistake of any business, to think that you're suitable to everyone. But the point is that for years now, since the 60s, since memory foam began, there's been a whole thing around orthopedic, therapeutic. None of it really means anything, and none of it actually does what it says on the tin. So most people who buy that sort of stuff wake up feeling more pain than they started the night. So
Hmm.
all of that kind of put together uh, is how the whole thing started. And I think I was very fortunate, privileged to meet so many patients with physios where tension, muscle tone, muscle activity is so extreme. So a lot of involuntary movement, a lot of an inability to anticipate. So if, for example, you were to lift up your right arm, your left leg would engage or you'd fall over. Or if you were to do that on a lilo, you'd immediately fall over, if you know what I mean, because you're not, the ground's underneath you is unsteady. For the patient groups that we're talking about, the reaction to that is like the most awful tone and discomfort. This is almost like a comfort marker. If you're relaxed, then you must be comfortable, right? If you're not relaxed, you can't possibly be comfortable. So kind of understanding that as I've gone along, and that's kind of, so yeah, so a lot of it was um yeah, came out of a totally different situation. You know,
Yeah, it sounds like it. What were some of the biggest challenges that you faced in turning that sleep science expertise? Because you talked a lot, sounds like you have a lot of very specific knowledge, but turning that into a business.
the first thing was the first biggest challenge, I suppose, was or is that the average intervention in the NHS, which is the National Health Service in the UK, so we have a public health service here, unlike you guys, is that the average intervention takes 19 to 21 years to make a meaningful change in the NHS. In a big old beast like that is like 20 years. So I think that was a challenge, like understanding that was a challenge. So understanding the reality of that, that's just, there are companies that have developed, for example, eye treatments, surgeries for certain conditions that would render you blind. And over the period of time, the commission has allowed for you to treat one eye because you don't need two to see, and now you can treat two people. So there's sort of the brutality and the the kind of the way that sort of humans have to be considered, because fundamentally it costs money to make people better, or health service costs as a general rule. Um, a lot of this stuff's overlooked because no one really, it doesn't help the hospital all that much, but it has such a significant impact on the people that we serve. So it's kind of like, yeah, once you understand the reality of what you're facing, it can change that, because even though the product's amazing and even though it helps people immediately, that doesn't guarantee success. Or even though we've researched it, right? My first major retailer was the biggest retailer in the UK, a company called Dreams. And at the time, they were one of the only three profitable bed stores, bed retailers in the world. Um, and their first order was huge, but they didn't really know how to sell the products. They weren't selling it with integrity. They weren't selling it to the right people for the right reasons, which in essence is going to kill your brand off. So, but even getting to them in the first place, I'd done some actual independent clinical research with a university. It demonstrated that the product, that Levitex, the mattresses were more comfortable, the toppers were more comfortable. People felt they could sleep on them longer. The pressure relief was better. So there was quantitative and qualitative data, and they couldn't have cared less. And it was only when I did a Kickstarter and actually got a bit of traction and a bit of demonstration of actually, not only have I made something that people would benefit from, that they would need, they actually want it. Until I got to that point, actually, no one really cares if your product is awesome and does amazing things. No one cares. So
Yep,
what?
that's actually what I was going to ask you about is like how, because I think a lot of entrepreneurs struggle with educating their audience about new or overlooked concepts like you have. And so I was going to say, like, how did you tackle that, in getting Levitex out there? But you did Kickstarter then.
The first thing we did was a Kickstarter.
That's awesome. Tell me about that.
Yeah, you know what? It was a brilliant baptism of fire because, like I said, my original business plan was to be totally faceless, to have nothing to do with being front and center of the business. I honestly, it's not for me, but it's become something that's worked, and annoyingly, it's worked because it's meant I've had to continue to do it. But like that was never the plan to be the face of the business. The plan was research, identify a problem, the traditional way, identify a problem, find a legitimate mega solution, prove that it works, and just then surely you can sit back, relax, and go and live in Barbados, right? And it's just not the case, and it's so annoying because you really
Yeah.
there's an absolute moment in time where you're like, I'm gonna have to explain it to you as well, like on top of it being great, and half of the pushback is people going, what you're saying sounds stupid and doesn't make sense, and we don't agree with you, or certainly at the beginning of my social media stuff. we got a lot of people that would say he's only trying to sell a pillow. He's providing all this content and spent all this time, sweating through being creative, and actually he's just trying to. And it was so frustrating because it had nothing to do with selling a pillow. The pillow's easy. The foam is a formulation with material properties that work. Our best worst review was that our foam is just a piece of foam. Absolutely, it is. That's exactly what it is. It's not all the ridiculous layers that don't really mean anything, that look really cool graphically, but actually you're sleeping on a bowl of porridge that's going to give you a bad back. And it costs you loads of money because it's got all these layers that don't mean anything and have no evidence, no proof, no nothing. So yeah, it's that. That's probably your question. I know I've waffled a little bit, but your question I think originally was what's been your biggest challenge? Is knowing that you're right, not being arrogant about that, because you've got to be so humble in letting people take the time it takes to hear your message, even be interested in your message, care for your message. A lot of people don't want to hear your message, even if it's going to make them better. Like
Oh,
that's really quite a common
so
thing,
good.
because we're creatures of habit. So I had a patient today. So we do a lot of work with NHS staff, the nursing staff. People don't realize that all of these amazing human beings are doing 28-day, 12-hour shifts, which is going to make their sleep 10 times more challenging than mine because I don't do 12-hour shifts. I don't work shift. A lot of them, so 1 in 3 healthcare staff are also looking after mums and dads or husbands or wives, so they tend to be the carer of the family. Um, they all spend loads of money on a bed. It costs money, and that's the only sort of evidence they have for it being any good. One lady today went to bed at 10. She goes to bed at 10 every night because she thinks she needs 8 hours and has an alarm at 6 for work, but never falls asleep before midnight. So every night she's basically given herself the most awful beginning of a night where she's guaranteed, and she knows it, to stare at a ceiling. But she wouldn't dream of not doing that because habit and cultural norms dictate that you've got to go to bed at 10 or you've got to get 8 hours. And actually, I don't know about you, I don't know how many hours you need or you think you need, but the only measure for that is, did I wake up feeling better? And with things like, we discussed at the beginning about shoes. I was talking to you about the principle of you not wearing my amazing brand new Converse Malden mid tops, which are, by the way, I wish they'd have made earlier because they're awesome. But they're an 11 or a 12 US, so you can't wear them. It would be ridiculous to try. And even though you've got mega trainers, I can't wear them either. But yet you would happily promote the pillow that you were on that maybe felt nice, and your analysis of it feeling nice will definitely be based on how you fall asleep, not how you wake up.
Wow, that's a
That's
really
the
good point.
Yeah. So it's that's been the biggest challenge. Is people think some people are actively saying this guy is just trying to trying to delegitimize the message without even understanding it, or the reasons behind it. What we're trying to achieve. I invented a mattress that actually helps support your body. I invented a foam formulation that is a comfort interface. It touches the human and it works in a certain way that you feel the support. So in the same way that you feel the support in the chair or whatever, are you sat on a chair now? I can't see behind you. Is there a
I
chair?
am. I'm sitting in a chair.
Okay, so you and I can both sit and chill and relax in our chairs, awake, and feel relaxed, feel our muscles relax, as I'm doing now, momentarily, because this is comfortable. When it stops being comfortable, I'm going to move. And also behind me is this firm base of support, a chair. It's never going to move. So when I lean back, I don't worry about falling. The anticipation of falling over isn't there. If we were both on a stool or if I was sat on the edge of the bed, I'm now holding my core. So you and I understand that. You and I understand our posture, we understand our daytime postures, but no one's really understood the impact of what they lie on. And like I say, silly things like every single patient in hospitals around the world, every single Olympic athlete around the world, and most people who go and buy a pillow from a shop around the world, which is nearly everyone, has gone and bought the same size pillow or the same material. So you could buy a big, firm, fluffy pillow that's big enough to fill the space between the ear and the shoulder. But if it's made of fiber and it compresses when you squidge it with your hands, then it's not supporting the weight of your head, which is like 9, 10 pounds. But yeah, we'll buy a bouncy pillow because it's supportive. So yeah, there's such a simplicity to what we've done, um, but it works.
Well, let's go into that a little bit. What are the biggest misconceptions people have about sleep posture? Because you touched a little bit on a couple of things, but let's just go into detail about that.
The biggest misconception is that you can sleep however you want because the spine was designed to be robust. And the point B to that is that you should be able to you should be able to prove it. So the way I describe point one is people who are under 30 who have never really experienced chronic pain or illness will probably tell you to sleep however you want. People who are 50 with arthritis looking after their parents who've had a stroke, who find it difficult to get in and out of the car but don't complain because they've got so much other stuff going on, uh, don't agree with that statement. What I also know to be true is your whole audience will all know, whether they agree with it or not, how to sit properly, which is, nice straight back and knees and feet all to the floor, everything's in an alignment. So we sit properly, we stand like soldiers at Buckingham Palace, but then we all fall asleep in a twisted pretzel position on a bowl of soup as a lying surface that cost us loads of money and has all this cool tech that's not really been proven that just says perfect night's sleep, which I don't know about you, but I've not had in a long time because I've got two dogs that sleep in my bed. I've got four children. I run my own business. I have ADHD. I have hay fever. There are a million reasons why I may or may not sleep tonight that my
Yeah,
pillow Levitex will not help with. It won't help with PTSD. It won't help with fibromyalgia. It won't help with
sure.
chronic pain. What it will help is if you have disturbed sleep because you're waking up, like you described it, I think, when we chatted just before, you said, I'm a really light sleeper. I'm always aware of everything that's going on. I can hear, like, buzzards in the garden a million miles away, right? And I would challenge you and say, are you just uncomfortable? Because then I said to you, what do you sleep on? And you went, I haven't got a clue. And I was like, but didn't you just say you're really hot on all stuff sleep, but yet the main tool for your sleep, you don't even know what it is. And you're the same
Yep.
as everyone, by the way. You will definitely know what you've eaten, what your top speed was when you did whatever the thing is that you do, I guess, if you run or whatever you have an activity. Is there a sport that you do? You look
Yes,
healthy, fit.
I do. I mean, I work out, but I'm not. My kids are doing sports, and they know all of their metrics and things that they need to
Right,
hit and stuff. But I'm just trying to maintain and keep a healthy
right.
lifestyle, which is a lot of this is really important to me. And and we're talking about, oh, you know what you ate, you know this and that, and people ask me like, how do you, how much if you they find out I don't drink coffee. If you don't drink coffee, how do you survive during the day? I'm like, well, I mean, I try to get enough sleep. Like I don't know, it's not rocket science. So it is
Yeah.
these things are very important to me. And yet as we've uncovered in this conversation, never even dawned on me to think about any of this stuff. So what are three simple changes that you would say anyone can make to improve their sleep posture at night?
Thing one, fill if you understand that we all have a habit forming when it comes to the associations of sleep. So most of us will fall asleep in the same exact position every night. So we all and those of the about to challenge that point. I'm not talking about what happens through the night. We all move, want you to move. Moving's good. If you don't move, you're dead. So we're all in agreement that moving's good. What I'm asking you is that last wakeful moment, just before you zonked out, just before the sleepy chemicals, after you'd brushed your teeth and been to the bathroom and whatever your routine is, you will fall into a position, 100%. What is it? And ask yourself if it's comfortable because you fell asleep really quickly, or if it's familiar and you're just exhausted, so you fell asleep really quickly. And the best way to know that is if you woke up feeling pain or if you had a disturbed night's sleep, because 9 times out of 10, it's not the anxious thoughts. It's not what you're worried about for tomorrow's day at the office. If you were asleep, if your sleep was deep because you were comfortable, it might not be. Once you get to an alert point, that's when the intrusive thoughts might come in. Or once you get to an alert point, that's where the noises, like you said, might come in where you can hear things because you're a light sleeper. But actually, if you just were comfortable, if your muscles were relaxed, if you had freedom to move on what you were lying on, in the same way as I can easily move on this chair versus a gym therapy ball, or you can stand on a floor easier than wet sand. So Levitex is the same thing. It's a lying surface designed to absorb your uh what your body is doing, the sixth sense, if you like, your understanding of where you are in space, without being a brick, without being a bowl of soup. It's the perfect marriage in the middle, because that's what I recognized people needed. Not just for my own sort of narcissism, and it actually worked. It worked on people who couldn't speak. It worked on people who you've really got to go to hell if you're not doing right by. If you're going to a rehab center and selling something that's not appropriate, you might make a couple of quid, but you're definitely going, into the fiery pits of hell when you've finished your successful business, right? So all that together, this is, and it's just really simple, but like you said, you've not thought about it, although you've thought about so many other elements. And one of the points you made at the very beginning, which is perfect, is we business owners, entrepreneurs, sleep is like the cousin of death. I think they used to call it in the 90s, didn't they? That was the whole pitch. I think it was like a rapper in New York that used to say it. And the sort of that image of the yuppie with his massive cell phone with the aerial, going, hey, I did another all-nighter last night, and we sold high, and we whatever, and actually, if you've not slept continuously for 17 hours, you are essentially your cognitive function is the same as if you were legally drunk. If you were drink driving, it's the same. So ask yourself, as a business owner, am I making the best decisions? Am I having the patience to digest an issue with an employee, or consider their idea that doesn't make sense straight away, but on reflection, actually, that's brilliant? Do you make the right call? We're rolling the dice every day, right? How many
Yeah.
dice rolls do you make wrong just because you're snappy, or you woke up and your back hurts, so it's put you in a pissy mood? If you wake up in
Yeah.
pain, or you have disturbed sleep, then what went wrong from when you went to bed comfortable to when you woke up feeling like you needed to have your spine ripped out? And I would argue probably the position that you fell asleep in and the surface that you lay on, and that's the end of it. Uh, and that's what I'm trying to address.
Yeah. Well, what's next for Levitex, and where do you see your future of sleep science going?
What we started doing was demonstrating to planet Earth that there was an issue called sleep posture, which really wasn't considered. The second thing we did was demonstrate the benefits of Levitex, and what we want to now do is bring the two things together. So the things that we do in healthcare with patients, they really aren't. It's not something that most people would really care about. It's not going to inspire somebody to buy our invention, but actually, if they recognize, it's exactly why they should. The fact that we can make a person more comfortable when they have so little capacity for comfort. Their body shape is so poor. Their care is challenging. Their needs are so complex. If those patient groups that we work so desperately hard to improve the sleep of can be benefited from what we do, then arguably everyone else can be too. So what we're doing, what's coming, is a rehab range. So sadly, because of the role I play, and because of the growth of business, all my mates, all my friends whose parents are starting to sadly pass away, or whose family have had, you know, um, diagnoses of cancer or poor mental health, there's quite a gamut of different things, but invariably very few people know how to make us sleep a little bit more comfortably in a realistic, addressable way. And so to bring all of that knowledge into a range of rehab that's accessible to general consumer, like our mums and dads will not need to go to hospital, but possibly need a physio, and aren't necessarily managing their optimal sleep for that age group. When you've arthritis has started, is snoring, menopause, pregnant women, all of these people have an issue with comfort in their sleep, and there is a lot that they can learn from what we've learned from those very poorly people.
Yeah, I love what you said about um, qualifying people based on like, oh, if you're on this age, this is what you would say. If you're this age, this is what you say. Because we kind of have this running joke of like, oh, I'm the age of where I now get injured in my sleep. And people that are under that age are like, what are you talking about? And people who are over the age like fall over laughing because they're like,
Yeah.
right, that happens. I woke up and I without an injury, and I didn't have this injury when I went to bed, and when I woke up, it was there. What
It's
just
such a
happened?
horrible admission of age, right? So
It
when
really
I
is. So
hit,
you're telling me this, and I'm like, but
yeah,
you did list something on there that I think is also overlooked. Just kind of some of the conditions, part of our aging. But I also think that maybe we wouldn't experience some of these issues if we knew about. It's so simple. Usually the answer is really, really simple. I come across a lot of smart people, people who are very driven, who care about, we're talking about performance and all these other things, and they do all these things to maximize that, but just the simplest things that we
I
don't know
think
what
I
we
think
don't know
that
sometimes.
that's when we're going to get to our inflection point when the disparity between somebody like yourself, intelligent entrepreneur, aware, very self-aware, understands you know what I mean in terms from a health perspective, a wellness perspective, but there's a disparity between that knowledge around the what you're lying on when that's married. Because like now we've had this conversation, it's kind of really I can't believe I'm not. And how are you going to sleep tonight, right? He's like, I'm not going back to that bed. James has killed it for me, and I understand that, so I'm really sorry, but there are ways because I think you asked. Fill the space between ear to shoulder if you're lying on your side. Fill the space from tip of the head to the bed if you're lying on your back. Try and make the spine nice and straight. If your mattress is soft, it will always fail in the middle. So anyone who sleeps on an orthopedic mattress, sit on the edge where your head is, sit where your feet are, sit in the middle. You bend and pivot at the hips, right? So if you sink into your bed, you're sleeping on a hammock. And nobody successfully slept on a hammock on their side ever since, the days of travelers. So yeah, that's my best advice for people who are not getting quality sleep. If you're waking up in the night and you need a pee, you probably don't. You probably just sleep on a really cheap pillow from your local supermarket. You silly people.
I know, guilty, guilty. Well, this podcast, James, is called What It Takes, and you talked a little bit about your entrepreneurial journey and how you got here. But what does it take to be a business owner in your experience?
Um, an unwavering belief, not if not in yourself, in what you believe your idea can genuinely do. Um, so validation that's not vanity, but that actually allows you to recognize that you were right. You're going to get so much hate and negative, but if you've really been able to see that it's done its thing, just it has there's so many kicks. I'm really grateful because I fell into something that I was really good at, I think, or naturally, I found my calling. Levitex is just a brilliant product off the back of my calling, I think. So yeah, I think it takes yeah, some thick skin. That's for
But I
sure.
love how you said it too. I mean, that's like a quotable thing. I think you need to like pin that is, when we were talking about challenges, how you said knowing that you're right and making, how did you say it? You said the biggest challenge is knowing that I'm right and having to wait for everybody else to catch up. And
It's
I understand, like, that is so good. But you have to be unwavering in that, and you just have to keep going because I think you're right. A lot of people do have brilliant ideas, they do have amazing gifts, but and sometimes they may even know they're right, but it is not necessarily unwavering, and they kind of
it,
falter to and fall to
it's
what the
it's
rest
it's
of the world
also
is saying.
it requires knowing that you're right and owning it also requires an element of humility because I could go into, for example, a hospital environment, a really high top consultant environment and be screaming my message, and actually that's so sanctimonious. They're dealing with 5,000 other things. This is the one thing I'm great at, and I can't just come in and bowl that in. So that there's that subtlety as well. But yeah, there's
Yeah, that's
definitely
great.
that's a challenge.
Well, James, this has been an absolutely eye-opening conversation for me, at least. Sleep is something we all do. Most of us don't think about how we sleep. I happen to be somebody who does, and I am just like, my mind is blown. But you've not only built a successful business, but you've truly made an impact in healthcare, elite sports, and just everyday well-being. So thank you for sharing your journey and expertise. Before we wrap up, where can our listeners connect with you and learn more about Levitex? Do you have anything cool going on? Anything that
Yeah,
they need to know
we have
about?
We have a really cool TikTok channel. Our social media is really cool because it's adding value every day, showing you how to improve your own sleep for everyday people, all the sorts of common reasons why we might not sleep. So please check out Levitex on social and look out on our website, levitex.co.uk, for this new rehab range, which is going to be a game changer.
Awesome. Awesome. Well, thanks again, James. And to our listeners, if you found value in this episode, like I sure did, make sure to subscribe, leave a review, and share it with somebody who needs to hear it. So until next time, keep pushing forward and discovering what it takes. Would you or someone you know like to be featured on this podcast? Our applications are now open. Apply today at seekersolution.com and click on the podcast link to get started.